Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this talk. My name is Nadia Wang, and I'm editor at Art and Market. And I would first like to introduce the panelists. We have John Yavuz, founder and director, Yavuz Gallery. I think we should give a round of applause or something. Yes. Thank you. Let's just keep it cool and casual. And then we have Beverly Yong, co-founder and director of Rogue Art. Beverly, thank you. And Jasmine Prasetio, Managing Director, Southeast Asia, Sotheby's. Hi, Jasmine. All right, so Lou Sampson couldn't be with us today. She has an emergency, but I think we're still going to have a really great conversation. So let's get started. So the question on the table is there a Southeast Asian market now? And I think I speak for everyone in attendance when I say that we believe there is a Southeast Asian art market. And the point of the panel, as Stephanie Bailey, Conversations Curator for Art Basel Hong Kong, has put across in the introduction, is to explore the conditions by which a Southeast Asian art market might operate. So Jasmine, let's start with you. Sotheby's hosted a sale in Singapore in August 2022 for the first time in 15 years. And that was well reported in the press, of course, right? And all the headlines. And just before that, the auction house's first major exhibition in Vietnam, Timeless Souls Beyond the Voyage, in July 2022 as well. Could you tell us about the conditions that provided the motivation to hold these two events? Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me, Nadia. Sotheby's has always believed in Asia, and in particularly Southeast Asia. So the plan was not overnight, but we wanted to invest resources into growing the market. We have seen absolutely a growth in Vietnam, for example, and we wanted to bring an educational aspect, a nonprofit aspect to to sharing what we have experienced and the knowledge we have with art. So for the Vietnam exhibition, we brought in the four quartet from the École des Beaux-Arts de l'Indochine. And the significance of this is because these masters left Vietnam and they went to France. So for most of the Vietnamese, they did not have access to seeing these pieces in real life. So that was a great success that exceeded our expectations, and we were so overwhelmed by the response in the market. So the Vietnamese were so passionate. We had 4,000 audience come over 4 days. We had the exhibition at the Park Hyatt Saigon, and the hotel had to direct the traffic because it had such an overwhelming response. But I think what we've learned from this is that there is absolutely a Southeast Asian art market, not only in the region itself, but also from overseas collectors. And for the Singapore auction, I think when we last had the auction in 2007, and we decided to move the auction to Hong Kong, it was because we wanted Southeast Asian to be in the international platform, to be appreciated by international collectors. And within these 15 years, we have seen the market truly grow. And as an example, a major Georgette Chen is in the Long Museum collection in Shanghai. So that's very international. We have a Hendra Gunawan that's been that was a record price at that time, sold for 4.2 million US dollars, and that was collected by a North Asian collector. So with all of this, we came back to Singapore, and we wanted to show that indeed, all the art and the passion that everyone in the community and ecosystem have, given their energy to, there is fruition to all of this endeavor.
Thank you for that, Jasmine. What I'm hearing is that, there's this platform that you've created, right? For all of these things to come to be. And I want to now move to John. Yavu's gallery operates, of course, both in Singapore and Australia. And you have been in Singapore since 2010 and moved to Gillman Barracks at 9 Lock Road in 2014. Please visit. Could you speak about how you find the Singapore art scene to have changed in the 12 years since you've opened your gallery here?
All right. First of all, thanks for coming and spending this hour with us. I opened the gallery in 2010, and we actually were at Waterloo Street first, and then moved to Gillman Barracks. What has changed in Singapore is not so much the domestic environment, it's more how Southeast Asia and us as a Singaporean gallery, really homegrown gallery, have started collaborating with galleries from around the world. And I think when people ask me how can Southeast Asia develop and how did Southeast Asia develop, it is, I think, for us how Southeast Asia has been seen outside of Singapore. And I think the gallery has gone from strength to strength, and it's not just us. Many galleries in Southeast Asia have gone from strength to strength, and it's not necessarily with what they have done as an individual standalone gallery, but in collaboration with galleries from America, from Europe, and especially from Australia. So we see Singapore not necessarily as a standalone island, but as a place that has really grown over the past 10 years because there was interest from outside. And I think if we don't start and continue these collaborations, I don't see the Southeast Asian market grow further. So the key for the growth, and I think where we have arrived, is the interest from overseas.
Yeah. Thank you for that, John. I think you have to switch on your mic. Did? Okay. Or maybe someone can help him out a little bit. Oh, great, perfect. Thank you for that, John. So I think we're just trying to draw, the context for the Southeast Asian art market. So we've heard from Jasmine and from John, and now Beverly. You co-founded Rogue Art in 2008 together with Rachel Ng and Adeline Wee, and continue to run it with Rachel as contemporary Southeast Asian art specialist focused on the creative, strategic, and organizational management of art and cultural projects, exhibitions, collections, and publications. And I think that's quite representative of how things go in Southeast Asia, right? You kind of sort of do a lot of things at the same time and wear lots of hats. Could you tell us in broad strokes about any significant changes in the Southeast Asian art market that have had an impact on your work in the past few years?
Thanks, Nadia, and thank you everyone for being here, and thanks for having me. Just actually listening to Jasmine and John, and it's clear that actually we all sort of maybe operate in different ideas of a Southeast Asian art market. I think for us in our practice, perhaps the idea of an art market, it might be broader than to do with the buying and selling of artworks. But I think here our conversation is really about the collector's market, the collecting market, right? The buying and selling of art objects to an extent. I think because we've been around for a while, we were in the gallery business from the late 90s or early 2000s, and then we started Rogue Art in 2008. So I think to think about recent trends, I'm not sure, but in the long view of things, perhaps broadly speaking, collections that we've known who are involved with Southeast Asian art, collecting Southeast Asian art, have now come to a sort of maturation. It's a long cycle, so collectors are thinking about management, thinking about legacy. So we've got thinking about that, and we've got previously when we were maybe working more with corporate collections locally or national collections, now actually private collectors are inquiring, asking questions, and we're working with private collections. So that is open, that takes up quite a lot of our time now, a part of our practice. Secondly, I think just generationally, there's sort of so many new practices, new audiences. So some of our work is really about connecting dots and connecting knowledge through publication or workshops or conversations. So now we're having to find new ways of connecting dots, new ways of looking at the bigger picture. And so we've also had sort of questions or requests for sort of knowledge building projects, capacity building, educational things about Southeast Asian art, also making us sort of come back and do more research and look at that. And I think maybe finally this thing about the sort of growing international interest in Southeast Asian art, has also sort of provoked a lot of sort of inward-looking or outward-looking, just deep rethinking again about the possibilities, but also the dangers, also the problematics of that. So we've been thinking a lot about that. So thank you for this opportunity, because it's made me also, gives me an opportunity to think about how these things are planning out and how the conditions are that we're working into. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, that sounds like there are a lot of shifts, but not unexpected ones. And I wonder if you could talk about, how you've continued to engage with clients, because things have changed, right? And especially with the pandemic, having to work digitally, having to, send PDFs through WhatsApp, which became such a major way of working, or having to do OVRs. Could you tell us about how that has kind of enhanced your business? Maybe, John, you can start. Yeah.
I think for us it was during the pandemic a question of should we get closer to our clients or should we start looking for new clients? And we decided very consciously to strengthen the relationships we've had already. So I believe I come from a banking world, and so when you're in crisis, you go back to your clients and ask them to support you. And so that's what we did. We went back to all those clients that got lots of discounts over the years, that got the trophy artworks that we supported, and it was time for them to really return the favor. And I think in this world and in this environment, you A, ask for referrals, you B, ask for introductions, and you ask for support. And so we really spent those 18 months re-engaging with clients, really scanning our client books and looking at who did we meet over the years, because what was cut out was the opportunity to meet new clients. So if you can't meet new clients, you go to those that you already met. And so that was really our strategy. Go back, re-establish those relationships, re-engage with them, and have those really meaningful conversations. Everyone had a lot of time, obviously, at hand. And so that was actually something quite powerful, because you see, a relationship is not just about the art. A relationship with a client is more than just talking about the work. You start strengthening relationships by getting to know the family, maybe. It's all about succession planning. You start talking to the children. You've sold to the parents. And this is really what we did. We got to know the families better, their stories, what was happening maybe. We had not spoken to them for 2 years. And that's what we really did for 1.5 years. So for me, it wasn't so much about, we've got to do OVRs, quickly let's redesign the website, let's quickly do links. That was all not important for me. I really channeled it just towards the client, the person, and having the opportunity to speak to them. For me, all that technological angle of the crisis was secondary.
Okay. Down to relationships.
Absolutely.
And what about for you, Jasmine? Were you also adopting the same strategy?
We actually we utilized both offline and online. So I think in the context of Sotheby's, it was very necessary to enhance digital technology. But as a company, we had already had that vision in 2019, and that was very fortunate because by the time the pandemic set in, our platforms were ready to be rolled out. So we revolutionized the way we engage with clients by setting up a lot of online sales, quite frequently globally. And we saw an overwhelmingly positive response from Asia. So for the past few years, we can say that out of the new buyers, 68% came from Asia. And out of these, out of the buyers globally, Asians actually spend about 20% more on average compared to other countries. And aside from that, Asians became 40% more active in bidding or in their interests. So we have that. But at the same time, we do have to, it gives us also the opportunity to engage on a deeper level with our existing clients. So sending PDFs does not work. I think we always have to pick up the phone, have a personal conversation, recommend pieces that we know are, what they're looking for in their wish list. So.
I guess, the personal touch is always the most important, and then that's what you offer as well, Beverly, right, to your clients.
I mean, just to clarify, we don't really work much in the trade, so we don't represent artists, we don't buy and sell. So for us, I think the pandemic was more about, I suppose, about sort of investing time and the time we had in more research, how to build conversations and the beauty of Zoom and the WhatsApp group, right? But perhaps from a sort of observational point, I mean, what we did find is we did see that there was a lot more interest. Instagram is amazing, right? Artists found ways of reaching out to new markets. Collectors really did start new collectors did start coming in through this sort of technology. So I think that made a big difference. Audiences really grew, especially at least on a Malaysian level, we could see that. And collectors as well, young collectors came in through this being at home, having nothing to do, and having that time to research. So yeah, that's what I saw, but otherwise not.
And with regard to new markets, I mean, John, in 2019, you opened a gallery space in Sydney, and you show Australian artists in Singapore and Southeast Asian artists in your Sydney gallery. Could you tell us, what the market is like in Australia for Southeast Asian artworks and what the market is like in Singapore for Australian artworks? Yeah.
To put it in reference, I
Please.
opened the gallery, I visited once,
Okay.
and then the pandemic hit. So
Yeah.
I went back to my gallery for the first time earlier this year, and then we moved again. So it was not an easy start, but what Australia really represents is an opportunity to strengthen the relationships that have always been there. The museums have collected Southeast Asian art for years. QGOMA has, I think now, had the 10th iteration of the APT. And this is an amazing opportunity showcasing art from the Asian region. And I think the first time they did it was very specifically on Southeast Asia with iconic groups of artists from Thailand, Indonesia, I believe, as well. And so we have re-engaged these conversations. The museums and the institutions are obviously, for historic reasons, interested in the region, and vice versa. That is something very new, that we are able to introduce our Australian and New Zealand clients to collectors, mainly in the Philippines, interestingly, and Singapore and Thailand. And so that conversation has always been around, I think, interest from both sides, but it was a slow start, yeah.
Thank you for that. I think, Beverly, you mentioned a couple of times that you're not quite in the trade and you don't work directly with collectors, but, Rogue Art, for example, completed the 4-volume series, Narratives of Malaysian Art, in 2019. And I wonder how publications such as this help to bridge the gap between the art world and its existing and potential public. Because, I think John and Jasmine, you're also in the business of, creating information, right? Because your clients want to be educated, they want to make good sort of investments. So how do you see your work then kind of supporting that agenda as well?
I think with the Narratives project, which is a sort of very large knowledge project, it was interesting because some of the first people we reached out to we handed around the hat. We funded this project through sponsorship, through really holding out a hat and people giving sort of $2,000 here, $5,000 there. So the collectors and the collecting community in Malaysia were really supportive. They were some of the first. They're saying that, I doubt many of them actually read the books, but they really believed in supporting criticality, keeping of the art history, the knowledge, and the public outreach. So I think there is this awareness of the collecting community, knowing they're part of something bigger, a bigger market. I mean, we have worked on publications which are more directly related to the collectors market, work the collectors on publications of and exhibitions of their selections from their work. We worked with Helitrans on a series for collectors as well. So those publications are also really interesting. It's taking the other way, trying to bridge collectors' work with the public, as many collectors are doing now, which is really great to see. Sort of sharing their collections, making publications. So we've been part of that, I suppose, in that way as well. Yeah.
And we're having this talk as part of SEAspotlight Talks with SEA Focus, which is in turn part of Singapore Art Week. And I know we're all running around doing events, being at art fairs and things like that. And I wonder if there is a Southeast Asian art market headquarters to speak of, and if you think Singapore is it. So I'm trying to be as provocative as Stephanie with a question. Is there a Southeast Asian art market now? So I'm asking if the headquarters is Singapore. What do you think about that?
Perspective, yes.
Okay. Logistical perspective.
Logistics, it's easy. It's very easy to ship out in and out. Jakarta is a bit more difficult, June. I'm sure you can tell stories. And the Philippines is a nightmare. So just to put it into context, it's very easy to do business here. And there is public support, right? The government provides grants for the galleries. We have a community that supports each other, which is everywhere, obviously, also in Jakarta and Manila. But there is just, I think, an environment that is more business friendly. I think that and if that really correlates to it being a hub, so be it. But then in return, business is good everywhere. And as soon as travel really reopened, we re-engaged with the clients, whether in Jakarta or Manila or in Thailand. What happened during the pandemic, and maybe that was the problem, is that the Instagram story, you framed it as being something very positive. For us, it was actually financially very good, but the fact that we were not able to do a due diligence on the clients and the fact that we did not know who was contacting us set everything slightly back. And I think what has become more and more important, and maybe it's easier to do so in Singapore again, is we need to know who we're selling to. And so here in Singapore, we have a little bit more transparency because selling art nowadays is very easy. It's not difficult. But who you're selling to, and especially Sotheby's, you come probably from the same perspective, has become, I think, the key. The level of transparency or the necessity for transparency has increased. And so that out of Singapore, managing those issues and aspects, it's easier for us to do so out of Singapore.
You need to know your client.
The KYC is critical now. As I said, selling art is not the problem, but most of the time you don't know who's contacting you.
Well, I do agree with what you say, Jan. But taking that aside, I think the success of anything depends on an ecosystem. And Singapore is a melting pot for cultures, for cultures and global citizens of the world congregating in Singapore. And it is necessary to have all of the elements align and flourishing. I mean, you need the artists to create great art that inspire. You need the buyers, the patrons. And that could be a Singaporean, that could be a Vietnamese flying into Singapore or living in Singapore, Indonesian, Hong Kong, Taiwan. I mean, the possibilities are endless. On the other side, we also have galleries. It's really important to have idealistic galleries who can share their knowledge and really promote all of the artists. We also need an international platform like an auction to also contribute to a certain level of transparency and democracy into the transactions of the secondary market. And we need the government to also give their blessing into an endeavor like this. So I think in Singapore, we have all of these ecosystem in place.
Thank you for that, Jasmine. I want to talk now about disruption. That was a nice sort of nature interlude. But traditionally galleries represent artists and broker sales on behalf of the artists, right? But during the pandemic, did you feel that that was threatened in any way because there were all these like artists who could reach out to their audience through Instagram, for example, or if we think about artist-run spaces, which have proliferated in recent years in Southeast Asia, do they disrupt the art market, if at all, or your business personally? Or you're just like, it's all part of the ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean, you just answered it. I don't
Right.
see any of these aspects being a disruption rather than an addition. Right? Everybody has something to say, and it depends on who you want to listen to. And but as you said, it all comes together, and so those are not disruptions. It's actually the other way around. Yeah.
Okay. And what about for NFTs? I guess that's an inevitable question when thinking about the art market. Is that to tell me that you don't really?
Oh, we don't do. No, we don't. We have artists
Yeah.
that do it, and
Right.
we support them. Is this something that I want to get into? Not at this stage. No.
What about for you, Jasmine, at Sotheby's?
Oh, Sotheby's has a metaverse.
Yeah.
And we've collaborated with different NFT artists, including Pac last year, Hakatao, and a lot more coming up in this year. So in terms of transactions, we've had, I think, about maybe a few 100 million of transactions for NFT. But that's just part and parcel of how the art market have evolved. There are traditional collectors who are still very much passionate about tangible art that they can bring home. But you have also next-gen collectors who collect both NFT and paintings and sculptures.
Well, we don't have a museum representative in this panel, but I'd like to talk about the role that the museum plays as well, intersecting with the art market. As gatekeepers, what does it mean for an artist's work to be placed in a museum collection? And what about in a corporate collection or a private collection that's made public? So anyone can answer.
Look, it's every artist's really objective to be collected by institutions because I believe it validates them to a certain degree, and it's in our interest as well. It creates value for the artist as well as for the gallery. And so those placements are important for us. I'd like them to pay,
In a timely fashion?
timely fashion.
Right.
So that doesn't always happen. But look, it's in their interest and it's in our interest. And it's more a long-term approach. Those sales don't always happen very fast. But I see more and more institutions, non-Asian institutions, non-Australian institutions doing a lot of research on Southeast Asia based on the transactions we're having. And so I see the European institutions, the American institutions engaging more and more in Southeast Asia, maybe more in historical works. So the inquiries we are getting is there anything that you have maybe that is pre-2000? And the curators are increasingly becoming more interested in this region. That I can definitely, as an observation, confirm.
Yeah. What about you, Beverly? Do you have any thoughts about this?
First, can we use the word safekeeper rather than gatekeeper?
Sure.
I think or a best benchmark. What I think is interesting. Definitely, we've also sort of obviously seen a lot of interest coming from bigger international institutions, but. We also, I think, in quite recent years, have now a network of regional institutions, which is something that wasn't there at all in the 90s. We couldn't imagine. I mean, there was Singapore Art Museum, but we're now in this whole new interesting playing field. But I think that regional institutions, many of them coming from private collections initially, but now doing a sort of more public work. I mean, I think they're still finding themselves and their remit and their role. So I think that's hard. It's still a moot question for me. What regional institutional collecting will look like, and also this danger of how, not danger, but how that's going to play against international institutional collecting, and what happens then also to affordability and keeping work at home, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, the role of museums, that it's a very powerful institution. And when we look at placements of contemporary art, or how the public or the market values contemporary art globally, there's always a reference to museums, nonprofit institutions, giving their patronage or collecting the work, and that adds value. In Southeast Asia, we are trying to catch up, I think, to the more established museums around the world. We don't have the Met Museum here, I mean, just historically speaking, but I think National Gallery, as well as Singapore Art Museum before that, everyone is trying their best to contribute and to build not only the market, but also to give a great historical context to all of the works here. So, long story short, museums are very much a necessity. And can the way they acquire art be improved? There's always improvement everywhere, but at least we have.
I think also maybe models for how they fund acquisition.
Right.
I think that's
Exactly.
something that can be. You know, I think there's also possibilities for new institutions not to catch up, but to maybe remake and rethink how it's more equitable or transparent or you know, invested process with the community.
I agree, and then always, like, you know, to have private museums come up. It sounds, you know, wonderful, but I think execution-wise, it's not as simple. In Indonesia, there is the Macan Museum, which have done, I think, a commendable role in all this. But it would be great to have more patrons.
Well, thank you for all of your answers. They were great. And I'm thinking now about whether, when we talk about the art market, is it inevitable to think quantitatively, right? From the prices achieved at auction to sales at an art fair. I mean, these are definitely important, and these are measures that are put in place. But how else do you think we could measure the health or the potential of the Southeast Asian art market?
Sotheby's first.
Okay, you go, Jasmine.
How to measure the health?
Yeah, maybe like the softer sort of measures.
You know, just from a very simple viewpoint. 15 years ago, what was the art market like? What was the scene like? We have auctions twice a year. We have a few galleries, right? No real art fair. I mean, we won't count Tresor, I guess, for anybody who remembers Tresor, but maybe not so many. But anyway, fast forward to today. Well, what are we looking at today? We're having C-Focus Art Fair that's being supported by Art Basel. You know, we have Art SG. We have amazing galleries, homegrown, you know, very passionate. We have a great pool of advisors. We have Art Agenda, who's now not only showcasing modern art, but also NFT and sneakers. I mean, we are constantly evolving. So the answer to that is...
Okay. I guess there's a community.
It is a
right?
community.
And then also I was thinking about what you said about collaborations. That's really important as well. The willingness of people here and abroad to just kind of work together. And I think that really came through in the pandemic too, right? Because we couldn't see each other in person, but then there was always this motivation of like, let's do something together. You know, we can make it happen. There was almost this like blind faith, I think, going into it. Like, we can do it over Zoom. Yeah, sure, you know. And if it wasn't perfect, it was fine. What do you think, John, about...
I mean, I just can talk about ourselves or the gallery. The number of opportunities has increased. The number of opportunities has increased for the artists that we work with as well as for the gallery. And that, for me, adds up to the value. And that really then cascades back to Southeast Asia and what it means for the region. I mean, look at how many Southeast Asian artists are now being represented by galleries that call their head office Europe, London, Paris, or New York, LA. That, I believe, is something we will now see increasingly happen, that this cross-continental collaboration is going to expand to a point where the market is just going to grow. And that is really, I mean, that sums up for me everything about Southeast Asia right now, that Southeast Asia is being integrated more and more into the global net of activity.
I think if I may just add, what you just said are the two key words, support and collaboration. I think we have to work together and we have to support each other because this is the only way we can grow together.
I don't want to put a dampener on things.
Go for it.
It is a rah-rah moment. It's a rah-rah moment that, Southeast Asia out there and the Tate is collecting, and it is a rah-rah moment, yes. But I think when you talk about quantitative, yes, I think more happy artists, more happy collectors, more happy galleries, that's a great measure. I think higher prices and the way that value is measured that way, I think that is a potential danger as well as as a measurement. I think there is a danger for local markets, and I think we have to recognize that. How do we integrate this wonderful becoming part of the international art circle and world with how do we keep local markets healthy? How do we keep things that are not just under 10,000 Sing dollars, but under 5,000 Sing dollars. How do we? That's market too, right? As we get into this other world, perhaps and we've seen boom and bust in a different way, with prices going very high. So in simple quantitative terms, for the collector's market, I mean, surely the volume of artworks being sold is actually more important than the prices being realized in my very simple thinking, and also the spread of this, right? I think the discrepancy between currencies and spending power is something we have to really treat realistically. I do worry, and because the relevance of work being made to local communities, to regional communities. I think that's something that regional institutions, dealers, everybody kind of we got to deal with it. I don't know how, but I think we have to deal with it.
Right. You think about access and you think about democratization,
yes,
and how it's not just all roses, but there are like real barriers to entry as well.
I'm saying that I think that as artworks get more valued, certain artists get more valued, and prices go into to you as collectors buying local artworks. Are we going to start cutting out local collectors, entry point collectors? Are we going to put them into affordable art? I mean,
now I'm challenging you. Isn't that exactly what we want? Cross between cultures. I do want to see an artist that has worked locally in Yogyakarta for years. I want his or her work to end up in a house in Northern Americas or wherever, it doesn't matter, but and vice versa, and that excites me, that I can cross between cultures, and I am also not not homogeneous. I bring so much as a person to the table, being Armenian, Turkish, Jewish, having lived in Germany.
I'm not doubting the importance of the diversity.
And that we need to do more and more. And I believe the increasing interest in the region is beneficial to all. It's beneficial to the young artists. It's beneficial to the artists that are already maybe selling in their 50s and hundreds of thousands, and to the blue chip artists. I think the whole infrastructure needs to be just strengthened, so there is enough support, so there is no abuse. there is enough transparency, and that for me right now hasn't aligned yet.
Right.
Right? It's the infrastructure, the transparency, and the way galleries do business. That for me needs to catch up. Maybe that's the risk, but the flow itself, I think that's wonderful.
If I could bring all of it back together and think about then what are the next steps? How do you build on that momentum, but sort of still try to solve the problems that have arisen from this momentum? What are you thinking could be the next step? Maybe through your own work, and how that is where you envision the Southeast Asian art market to go.
Gosh, I can again only speak about myself.
Yes, exactly.
It's the opportunistic growth, right? We started off here in Singapore with a vision. We have entered Australia believing that's a good market, and it is. And we are now embarking on a third location in Europe, which will happen in April. And so building those connections between 3 continents is at least my future. Right, and I believe in this conversation that we will be able to establish. It's already happening, but I think it's important, at least for us, to have a physical presence. Maybe not on each continent, but Europe, Asia, Australia. This link, this triangle, is going to create an incredibly dynamic business model for us as a gallery that really started off here 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a really good point about physical presence, because you do need to engage with people on the ground. And I remember when Silverlens opened in New York, that seemed so exciting for everyone, right? It felt like we were all really happy for that to happen, and hearing about their experience and thinking of how everyone has been really accepting and curious about the work that they're bringing. It's good for all of us. I think that's why whenever you talk about your own experience, it's also like, okay, whatever your experience is also positive for the whole scene, I think. What about for you, Beverly, about next steps, or how you think these problems you've identified can be solved?
I think I just think more conversations about the economics and the realities. I think that also, I think there are conversations about new ways to approach this idea of art economies, new ways for artists and infrastructure to find funding. Basically, what are we all in this for, right? To sustain, well, for me, to sustain creative practice and to bring that to the public, to be part of society, right? So I think that there are initiatives like Lumbung Gallery, which were developed for a Documenta 15. There is the whole NFTs on one scale, like for example, Art Agenda is doing, but also artists from Myanmar, Malaysia, trying to use that as an empowering way to empower themselves to create careers. There are lots of different. I think we have to think of different ways of creating economy and sustaining art practice beyond. The collector's market is really important. It's key, it's crucial, it's central. But I think it is also in the danger of becoming sort of entering this world of exclusivity that the international art market kind of projects. So I think that we need to grow and accept and support each other in different forms as well. Smaller scale, bigger scale, Yeah. So I think more conversations is perhaps where we'd like to sort of think about our practice going as well.
Well, thank you for bringing in that idea of other aspects of the art market that exist, right? And we can't just kind of exclude them for something that's really just very headlining, very forward-facing. Jasmine, do you have any thoughts about what is next for Sotheby's?
Sotheby's will still be focusing in our activities in Singapore, for sure. But I think I just wanted to add on a more personal level, what can we do today as members of this art community, as a collector, for example? The key is growth. What we need is new collectors. And they may have different starting points when they acquire their new art. But perhaps the first easy step is just go out there and actually buy something. Buy it, buy at the galleries, buy at the art fair, and see where that journey takes you.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for all your insights. And I'm now going to invite the audience. If you have questions for anyone on the panel, if you could just kind of raise your hand a little bit. Someone will come to, Stephanie will come to you with a microphone, and please introduce yourself and give us your question.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Zinang from Art Agenda, and I'm happy to host everybody here at this talk. I'm very taken by the last two questions. The bit about ways to indicate the presence of a Southeast Asian art market and ways that in personal or our professional capacities, how we can support and make the market more distinct, more visible. My personal contribution to this question, unsolicited of course, sorry, is that I would love to see some form of Southeast Asian art market history publication or some kind of publication that looks across the breadth of Southeast Asia as a geography. That I feel would be the kind of foundational material that will help us all to build our professional careers, either as a gallerist, in the auction houses, as advisors and whatnot, and for artists as well to understand beyond, of course, their very comfortable context. So that's I hope to see this in my lifetime. That's what I sometimes wake up thinking about, and yeah, in the future maybe take part in a project like that.
Yeah, Beverly, you want to take that up?
I was saying, Zining, you still want to write books. That's what you want to do.
I want to actually turn that into a question related to the idea of integration. And there's a sort of Southeast Asian art market is integrating into the global market, which is a point that Chan made. But I'd love to probe you guys a little bit more on the integration of the Southeast Asian market itself, which is, an accumulation of different markets. And there's that question of the national, and as Beverly mentioned, the local markets. And I wonder if you had any insight on this from Sotheby's in particular.
Can you repeat that question, Stephanie?
Yeah, so maybe, just to get a little bit more insight on how the Southeast Asian art market is actually integrating as a series of local and national markets.
So when we moved the sale to Hong Kong, we had to do a lot of information sharing and education, for lack of word for it. But we brought some highlights from Southeast Asian art to, say, our traveling exhibitions. Taiwan was one of the areas that we really invested our resources in because the Taiwanese are very open-minded and they collect very diversely across different types of categories. And we did see this pay off, and we saw passionate bidding, passionate collecting from that part of the world. So the way we integrate was to also set up a dialogue on the curatorial level between, say, Southeast Asian art with other arts from the region. So, for example, on abstract art, we have like Jutta Chun, Fernando Zobel, Christian Aichu. They can have a dialogue together, and this resonates very well with collectors from other countries. Does that answer the question?
Any more questions?
Maybe just one comment on that. For me, Southeast Asia is just a region, it's not a market. And I as a gallery, still look at Indonesia as an independent market that needs to be approached very differently to Singapore, to the Philippines, to Thailand. I'm sorry, I don't know Vietnam so well. So I think brushing them all off over just a one shoe fits all approach would be very wrong and very risky, and I find very disrespectful to the region. And so I think we need to maybe
next time have a talk, really, making sure that we talk about each specific country and how art history developed within that country, and how and what is collected, and where the philosophy for collecting comes from. Anthropologically speaking, when did people start collecting? What did they maybe collect? And what are families collecting today? And I think that history is very important for any gallery or for any commercial activity wanting to take place and to set foot and maybe establish themselves in Southeast Asia. I find it's very risky to look at Southeast Asia as one.
Yeah, so true. I think every time you do sort of like a blanket kind of a name, it doesn't work. But I think we've kind of internalized that a little bit because, SEA Focus is about showcasing Southeast Asian contemporary art, is the platform for it. And then ArtSG is banking itself as Southeast Asia's largest ever art fair. So thank you so much for the sensitivity. I think Beverly was kind of getting at that already with the local markets, and John, thinking about how it's unique in each country and not just the same across. But what do you think about that, Jasmine?
I do agree to a certain extent, and that was how I used to think as well. But I think there is power and there is impact in viewing Southeast Asia as a region as well. Because we see from the market, there is a lot of cross-regional support. Filipinos collecting Indonesian art, Indonesian collecting Filipino art, Vietnamese collecting Indonesian art, and etc., and Singaporean art as well. So even though it is important to be respectful of each country and the different cultural and social sensitivities in each country, there are similarities in the passion, I think, and the openness.
As a marketplace,
As
as
a
you're also
marketplace.
saying that it's a meeting, it's a narrative. It's also a historical narrative of,
Right,
as a
right.
trading nexus between the different countries as well, right? So it's
Exactly.
there.
And maybe there is a shift. There has been a shift now when we talk about Southeast Asia. We used to talk about Southeast Asian art from the region or created by artists from the region. But like you said, now what you said reminds me that Southeast Asia now is much more than what it was before. There's also collectors from Southeast Asia who collects very broadly across different categories, not only art, but also 20th century design, furniture. So interesting to discuss, I think.
I think we
Hello.
can.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I want to share because I'm from Hong Kong, and actually, I'm researching on the Southeast Asian market, and also I think about the Singapore relevancy or like a headquarter role in Southeast Asia. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's still in Singapore had to work on that. And like Jineng has said about any particular research or papers or books on Southeast Asian market. I researched, I couldn't find any representable books or publications. I think I recall that this is at least 8 years ago or 9 years ago. I think ArtStage did one book for the introduction of art as a stage. I think they have did something on individual country, but it's very brief. But then, if Southeast Asia is going to be a market or really significance, I think I agree with Candice. It's really individual. And at this stage, what we are listening is really more on the commercial aspect, really a primary market or secondary market on the art scene of Southeast Asia. But the thing is there anybody? Because my colleague is now in the SG listening about the museum side by the MAMI and all these different museums. So, but is there? I mean, if really is Southeast Asian art have to make a really like a global collaboration or making a significance in the global map, art map. I think we need to do more on the content side. I mean, the researcher, need to do more on the historical or performance. Like performance what a lot of people have done on the Southeast Asian art and artists. And this is not only the contemporary, but also modern. So it needs a lot of effort and resources and dedication and determination. It's not just like, for example, sorry for Basel, the government Singapore government have put a lot of effort to push the market. But it really need the whole ecologies, museums, Curator really did on that. I think NTU did try to do a lot of things, but I'm not sure whether she have really done the documentary or publications on the Southeast Asian art and artists and market, the evolutions. So
Right.
Can I just interrupt?
Please.
You're based in Hong Kong?
Yes, I'm based in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So my perspective may be a bit distorted.
Okay, Asian Arts Archive is I think a fantastic place to start.
Yes, they are doing a lot. Yes.
They have a library and an archive, a remarkable library on Southeast Asian.
Yes.
Shall I say, essays.
Yeah, I think I'll do a lot of things, yeah.
And again, here, we need to really maybe just step back 15 years ago. There's a lot of amazing writers that have done groundwork on Southeast Asia. Look up a writer called Yola Lenzi, who's teaching at La Salle, who's now done her PhD on Southeast Asian art. She has done groundbreaking work, bringing Southeast Asian exhibitions and traveling exhibitions on how Southeast Asia is framed and conceptualized. Those are important writings. She has done exhibitions in Turkey on Southeast Asian art, bringing a survey of more than 50 artists together. So I think because there is the spotlight on Southeast Asia that people are starting to question or ask, where do I start? What is available? Of course, there's always more. We want always more, but Southeast Asia has been discussed, framed, and has been really, I believe, put together in very critical essays over the past 15 years. And again, Asian Arts Archive in Hong Kong have really a fantastic library. And so if you're really interested, that's a great starting point.
Yeah.
There's a great writing on Thai art. David Tay has done fantastic essays on the history of Southeast Asia. So I believe there is a lot to start off with. Of course, there's always more, but I would really start there.
Yeah, I also think that the STPI did a lot of things too. So basically, I think it's what you have said about all this paper information. I think it's good to how to make it to public.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for that comment. Yeah, I'm just going to plug my own platform as well, Art and Market. You can find out all about Southeast Asian art. Go for it. And we also present things from Yavu's gallery with Beverly, with Sotheby's as well. So that's a great platform to start off. But I think let's just end it here. And if you would like to just linger for casual conversations, we can do that. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to John, to Beverly, and Jasmine for your time as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.